So we're taking a look at the difference between Chrysler engines, Ford engines, and Chevy engines. Now, the big thing with Chrysler, not a lot of people realize that by the late 90s and early 2000s, single overhead cam V6s had actually become their most popular type of engine. They're most common for their passenger vehicles. The only times they were really still relying on the Hemi was for like their pickup trucks and larger vehicles, but they had switched to single overhead cam. This is a lot different than what General Motors started doing. General Motors had stuck with the pushrod engine and actually made a pushrod version in the V6 engine known as the 3800 series. So that is probably the biggest difference with Chrysler, Plymouth, Dodge, Jeep, and Ram versus what Chevy was doing. Now, Ford was doing a combination of both. They kept the 5.0 pushrod engine into the mid to late 90s, but phased in the modular engines. Now, ever since the beginning of Ford's production history, the biggest difference is that they were doing a lot of engine families. So when General Motors had all these different brands, like 6 to 7 different brands, Ford's claim to fame was sort of the heavier, bigger, more old school engines and having different plants that catered to different needs instead of having like more corporate engines, which is what General Motors ended up doing. So Chevy, you normally, the models were more famous than the engines themselves. Even though the small block is a very famous engine, people more identify with which Chevy model they drive. Whereas Ford, people will typically say, I have a Lima, I have a Cleveland, I have a pushrod, I have a modular engine. Now, the newer engines are using what's called a supercharged V6 or V8. They're using what's called a mild hybrid system. So that's sort of what's infected most of the United States is they've switched from your old school V6, V8 passenger sedans to like hybrids and electrics, and your fun cars like your two-door Mitsubishi Eclipse and sort of, your affordable compact cars, which is what the American auto market was built on. Those cars have unfortunately sort of phased away. You can't just buy an old school Pontiac Grand Prix for $2,000 or $3,000. And even if there are some left out there on those used car lots, they probably have some transmission problems because I can account for that. And then they have, the two-door sports coupe. That has sort of really gone away as far as an affordable sports coupe. Now, Dodge used to make what's called the Dynasty and the LeBaron before they ever did the Sebring, and then they switched to more of their newer style technologies like the 200, and then they eventually phased that all out in favor of an SUV. So the affordable American mid-size sedan, the affordable sports car, those are unfortunately two segments that have really been affected by all the higher prices and